Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. We have back with us today Greg Soulje, and you may remember Greg from being with us here in the past on 365, or perhaps you've caught Greg's weather forecasts on This Week in Agribusiness on RFD TV or a number of other stations across the nation each week. You also can catch Greg's forecast on the This Week in Agribusiness section of feedstuffs.com every week. Welcome, Greg. Great to have you with us again. We look forward to hearing your thoughts on what's ahead in the next few months. And we know, of course, that winter is winter is almost over in about 90 days. We got spring. I'm already thinking spring.
I like that spin on things. No, we're actually just a couple of days out as of the airing this broadcast, the 21st of December, 9:27 in the evening Central Time Zone. And, so far, where's winter at here across the country, especially the heartland, the plains and Corn Belt locales, and really over some of our key livestock areas of the country.
Exactly. Been quite mild. So I want to thank all of you that are tuning in today here for this forecast. If you would have any questions for Greg, please post that in the chat. Or if you're joining us from social media, you can post your questions directly in those channels. So Greg, as we always kind of like to start, we talk about that drought.
Yep.
Where are we at? Where are the conditions? What are we looking at?
Well, here's the latest drought monitor. And yeah, I know it's winter time, but, we still keep track of this year round. It's just one of those years where there's virtually no frost or freeze of the ground, hardly any snow on the ground, except for some of the northern plains and downwind areas of the Great Lakes and what has melted away in the flooding rains of the past few days in the northeast of New England. But there it is. And for folks kind of keeping track of this type of thing, yeah, there's been a little worsening. I know we're not in the production part or growing season, obviously, but the I-70 corridor of Illinois and Indiana south towards the Ohio, getting a little worrisome. That shade of beige, deeper shade of beige, that's a kind of a moderate to locally severe drought setup already. In the northern and central parts of Illinois in good shape. You see there's been little change in eastern Iowa, little change in eastern Nebraska, a good part of Kansas, a typical trademark of a moderate to strong El Nino setup and pattern. And as well, note an increase over the past couple of weeks north and east of the Red River Valley, I should say the Missouri River Valley, up across the counties adjacent to the Canadian border, good part of Minnesota. There ought to be a lot of snow on the ground up there this time of the year. There isn't. And also some of this contributing to the kind of lack of a trickle-down effect, we'll put it in those terms, of moisture getting into the Mississippi Valley. So little change to the southwest. California for now is okay, but we've seen some worsening of the drought, but at the same time, the progression of weather systems, Sarah, so in the deep south. So some relatively good news if you take away the severe weather aspect over the southern states over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely not a white Christmas in a lot of areas. And we've seen out on that East Coast, unfortunately, we've seen all the TV coverage. There's not a drought there right now. I mean, there's terrible flooding and everything taking place.
Yeah, the back this past summer, some of those areas were in the midst of at least abnormally dry, locally drought-ridden setup out that way. That's been cleared out. And of course, prior to those rains and that storm that went up the eastern seaboard over the past 5 to 7 days, there was a bunch of snow on the ground. And a lot of that now on 6+ inches of rain is running in the streams and rivers. So on one side, improvement, the other side, some issues out there in the northeast of New England. And some of those drier regions you see in the Carolinas should see some marked improvement probably on later this week's, that would be the 19th of December's, actually tomorrow, Thursday's 20th of December's drought monitor should see some improvement out there. So that's what's going on here, at least as of mid-month across the country in the drought.
So we talked about snow just real quick here in terms of not having a white Christmas in a lot of areas. Are you keeping track of what that might look like? Are you some ideas on snow cover at this point?
Exactly. If we go on to the next slide here, you can see at least just a quick little synopsis here. We do foresee, this is put out by the folks at the Weather Service, some improvement is expected as we get deeper on into the winter season. Typical trademark setup systems run the southern United States, so there should be, with time, at least by their thinking, improvement into that lower Mississippi Valley Delta region. I think just a few weeks ago, in the last of any sugarcane harvest there, those soils were at 85, almost 90% short and very short in soil moisture. Pasture lands, rangelands have caught on fire at times. In any event, some improvements expected here quickly on the next few weeks and the months to come over the deep south. Parts of Kansas, the Pacific Northwest, and everyone else basically hold sway, and probably holding sway, if not worsening a little bit, some of the drought issues over the western Corn Belt. So that's the thinking, at least least based on the guidance from the National Weather Service through the end of the month of February.
All right. What else are we looking at? Did
Well,
we did we did we
yes,
talk snow yet?
yes, we're going to talk snow here because there hasn't been much talk of snow. So on to the next frames here. And first of all, this is what is going to bring some snowfall to some of our livestock areas. If not that, prior to that, some rain. You see this low and that curled configuration of the upper air, winds at 25,000 feet, that low coming across California as we head on through the weekend, early to mid next week. It makes its way into the plains and across the Corn Belt locales. Typically under those kind of lows, you do see a transition from what should be drought improvement rain and probably some healthy rains, and will re-muddy up the fields and pasture lands and probably traipse it through the kitchen for the holiday season around here. But we do foresee some snow in the forecast for parts of the northern and central plains, ultimately maybe as far south as Kansas, as we move on through late into the Christmas holiday period and approach the New Year's holiday and into parts of the Corn Belt as well. Not a big deal. I think it's not a winter storm per se. There is the surface analysis. You can see that system out of California, which they do need the moisture moving into the Plain States region on that middle panel up top. And then the web of lines, those isobars being some wind involved and a lot of rain changing to some snow. So livestock managers, bin and barn operators, be ready for some fluctuating temperatures, certainly footing conditions in the wake of this weather system that should generate probably an easily a 1 to 3 inch moisture swath out of Oklahoma, 1 to 2 as far north as maybe eastern Kansas, Missouri, probably 3 or 4 or more down through the Delta region. So some of those worst drought areas the next 7-8 days, Sarah, ought to get some significant rainfall. The backside again will have some snowfall where those have been few and far between for much of the high plains areas. But we've had a couple here the past few weeks into parts of West Texas and Oklahoma. And then moisture as well for California. Sarah, it's interesting to note that while there's no drought going on in California right now, the Sierra snowpack is only running at about 25% of normal. You take the snow, we melt it down, turn it into rain, and there's only about a 2-inch water equivalency. This is the time of year when California needs moisture in those mountains. So hopefully the El Nino weather systems will do just that. Quick snapshot here of snow cover, obviously through the Canadian Rockies. Normally, the snow cover is down to about the I-80 corridor, into the western Corn Belt locales through the upper Mississippi Valley. There's a little sliver, as you can see, downwind of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. And you can see on the next frame, it's really focused with anywhere between 1 inch to maybe 5 inches and quickly melting up through North Dakota, patchy 1 to 3 inch snow cover on the ground through Minnesota, a few inches downwind of Lake Erie and Ontario through New York State, away from where that rain area came on through. And look at the rest of the country. So, we go through these thaw-freeze cycles. It may be great, to get out and do the usual chores, and feed requirements, I'm sure, are going to be pretty much nominal, nothing too severe. But you do run into the problems here if you get some moisture in some of those grounds, footing, and some obviously hide issues on livestock. And I think that's what's going to begin to materialize across the plains and Corn Belt locales. And even that snapshot of snow cover is not going to come back to anything normal as you'd expect as we approach January here in the next few days.
What is that rule of thumb in terms of amount of rain equals an inch of snow? Is it
generally speaking,
5 inches?
1 inch of rain, it's a 10 to 1 ratio. So 1 inch of rain, if you were to come up with that, would be 10 inches of snow. So imagine 1.5 inches, 2 inches of rain in a right perfect 10 to 1 ratio. You'd have about 20 inches of snow. Now, the atmosphere doesn't work like that all the time. Sometimes you come up with those drier, more powdery type snows. And so that ratio then goes to 15 to 1 or 20 to 1. And it's a factor of temperature and how much moisture that cold temperature can hold. So the higher the temperature relative to making snow, the more moisture laden, the lower temperature, lesser moisture available, but the opportunity for the atmosphere to make more crystalline type snow. And that's the stuff that really fluffs up, blows around. You move it one direction, comes back in the other. So I know there's some folks who are helping us out in the broadcast who are kind of fearful of some of that stuff in January. So I don't think in the short term here, just do not see any Arctic air or any winter storms are going to have that capability of doing that on the wet, at least of the blowing snow variety and winter storm variety outside of that system coming through for next week across the plains.
So short term, what are we seeing?
Well, on to the next frame here as we move on through, at least in the shorter term, over the next 6 to 10 days and 8 to 14 days. I know everyone knows what goes on the next 1 to 2 or 3 days. Look at your phone, and we ought to, if you're in the weather business, you can't forecast 3 days out, then get out of the weather business. So it's really from a planning standpoint that why on This Week in Agribusiness and on these broadcasts as well, we're going to take more of a medium range, a longer range approach. We think our track record is pretty good. We've been doing this for a few years. So, but first, kind of the government take, because a lot of this stuff is on the internet, and I get people letting me know, hey, I saw this, or hey, I saw that. And I said, okay, well, make your forecast then. In any event, you can see those red dashed lines just means the atmosphere is incredibly warm through the Canadian prairie. Even there, a lack of significant snow cover. That's called a ridge, by the way, that arc as it moves up through Canada. That's warm air up aloft. That's warm air at the surface relative to January. You see that little buckle across Missouri and Kansas. That's the weather system moving on out. And right behind it, another ridge, if you will. And you see right behind that how those lines, those height lines, those levels of the atmosphere are really packed together. That's probably about 120 to 140 mile an hour jet stream coming across the Gulf of Alaska. So a lot of storminess out there, a lot of moisture out there. Over the next 8 to 14 days of the next panel, really not much of a change. You see some significant warming through the Continental Divide areas along and east of the Canadian Rockies to about Hudson Bay, James Bay. You know, we've had some recurrent cold there, but this just tells us there's no real cold air source available. There's not a lot of snow cover. Air masses like to migrate over snow-covered areas, so it's really to our benefit from a comfort standpoint, livestock management standpoint. No real super cold air in sight. And anytime you see those winds come down the mountains there, Sarah, folks who work in the engine shop, the equipment shop, you take a gas, you compress it, you warm it. Same applies to some of the thermodynamics in the atmosphere. You bring it down the mountains, you sink it, you compress it, and that's another way without any snow cover on the ground, you get milder air. So once again, it's kind of a typical textbook moderate to strong El Nino weather pattern that still holds on here as we move on through the last few days of the year.
And of course, with no snow cover, then it keeps temperatures when they come in,
Yep.
they're going to be warmer as
Yep.
and that probably has some influence, I would think, too, as to overall what we're looking at.
Yeah,
So as
and it's a quick turnaround to these. Anytime we get these cold air shots without that snow cover, air temperatures are able to quickly modify and moderate. So you use a rule of thumb. You have snow on the ground, you can easily take 10 or 15 degrees off daytime temperatures. And if you've got a clear sky, snow cover, and that cold at night, well, we know what temperatures do there. But in any event, I digress. Back to you.
so is the precipitation, is it getting in the ground? I mean, when
Yes.
we're getting this rain, is it getting there, or are we seeing total runoff?
No, well, except for the northeast of New England here on the maps and charts as we go forward now, and we'll take a look at some of these temperatures coming up, and we can just kind of fly through these. First, to answer your question, there has been absorption and percolation. There's virtually no frost or freeze to the ground outside of this what we call a diurnal swing. That's the range of daytime to nighttime. So you might get a little frost under foot and hoof, as we put it by day, and it quickly softens and melts. At least at night, I should say, it firms on up and then melts away by day. That's under the coldest of circumstances. But a lot of these temperatures here in the coming days, the next couple of weeks, are not even going to be anywhere near freezing. And if they are, they're just a few degrees off freezing. Any event, here we go. Temperatures from the feds, the government, through the end of the month of December. No big surprise. This is probably contributing to what we think is going to be some very mild overnight lows. Equal, daytime highs will be pretty comfortable, but there's absolutely no cold air in sight anywhere. California through the upper Midwest, Canadian prairie, really centered across the Great Lakes region. And we're talking about temperatures that are 10, 15 degrees up or above average. That puts nighttime lows into the 20s and 30s, daytime readings into the 30s, 40s, and 50s for our livestock operations in the central and southern high plains. Very comfortable as well. From a rainfall standpoint and snowfall in that 6 to 10 day into the next panel shows that a weather pattern that is on the tail end of the system that comes on through next week. With still some lingering rain and wet snow, but nothing out of control. Again, look at additional drought relief for much of the Corn Belt, the plains. The wet weather pattern, once again, will progress from where we need it the most, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, the Arklatex, into the southeastern states. There may be more rough weather head down through Florida from that severe weather outbreak last weekend, and then up the eastern seaboard as well. And on to the 8 to 14-day maps and charts. Really no big surprise. The warmth is there with that kind of ridging up aloft, virtually no snow cover, winds down the Canadian U.S. Rockies. And then you take into account all the other equations into the picture. The Pacific warming. We take a look at temperatures above the main atmospheric level that moves weather systems, and this is really no big change or thinking here. We concur with the government thinking rarely, but we do once in a while. And here it is, the next 8 to 14 days, and there's the precip chart that comes up right behind this as well. Back into a pretty quiet mode as well. So whatever snow cover there, Sarah, we come up with probably going to melt away. There should be some good absorption and percolation on that moisture as it lingers in the eastern states. And you can see California back into the thick of it. That 140-mile-an-hour jet stream expected to kind of hover its way between about the Bay Area to maybe about Portland, kind of oscillate back and forth. So and that is a typical normal El Nino setup. And again, they need the moisture there, and they need additionally the Pacific Northwest, where dryness and drought has been the story up until the past couple of 2 or 3 weeks.
So it looks like quiet and warm for pretty much, well,
Yeah.
through mid-January.
Well,
And
yeah.
roughly, I guess.
roughly.
I guess
No,
it would
yeah.
be early January when we're
Exactly.
talking 14. I've already wrapped up the year in my mind. So,
Not us or the
I don't wanna
broadcasting
rush
world.
it.
Don't do that to me. No, the microphone light stays on, I think, for me here in the coming days, week. But that's fun. I like to keep people up to date. So on to the next set of maps and charts here. And you can basically see our thinking. This is what you see on This Week in Agribusiness. You know, again, we've been doing this back since the Earl Finkel days. There may be one or two people that remember that guy, him and Orion. And I probably talked about this in our last broadcast, really pioneered this. And here we are, this kind of technology in this day and age. When I first got in the weather business, it was tons of paper, secluded in an office, and had to go to a TV studio to do stuff. And look at how we can do things these days. And anyway, this is the stuff that we generate for This Week in Agribusiness. Been with Max and Orion, and now the guy called Mike Pearson. And here's what we think here for the first week of January. Anything but a January feel. It's going to be probably more typical of November. You probably keep a couple of layers off with outdoor work and chores, especially through the upper Midwest, through the Corn Belt locales. You can see through some of our southernmost livestock areas, maybe Cotton Belt country. Reading's a bit below average, no big deal. No sign of any Arctic air coming. And here's the precipitation chart here for that first week of January. Some welcome moisture cutoffs feature. Those green areas are kind of an average of the jet stream, the steering currents. If we put every set of upper charts on here, Sarah, there'd be a polar jet, a subtropical jet, and a tropical jet that are actually showing up across North America in this El Nino setup. So quiet through the Midwest of the Corn Belt. If you're looking to make some money on snow, go to plan B, I guess. Pretty good go of it with outdoor work. Footing might be a little bit of a chore once in a while. Dry in California, wet for the Pacific Northwest, Florida, and the deep southern states as mentioned.
Reminder, if you have any questions or you want to know what's going on in your neck of the woods, so to speak, just post it there in the chat, and we'll ask Greg to fill us in.
I'll try to remember to look down there. So.
I'll make sure you see them if they come in. What are we looking at then, kind of through the end of January? Taking a look that far?
Yeah, we can. And let's go to the next round here. Here you go. We, again, just because it's an El Nino setup and you hear everyone kicking the tires and mild or warm and dry and snow free, it just means kind of a lesser of cold air intrusions. We've had a couple of them throughout the parts of the plains and Corn Belt locales. We've had a couple of snow and rain systems, one in particular about 3 weeks ago in Oklahoma, New Mexico, Colorado. But here you go through almost mid-January. So we turn a little bit colder, but again, thinking that there's not going to be a lot of snow on the ground. So again, another manageable setup for livestock, feed requirements, outdoor work, what have you, through a good part of the Midwest. Still some lingering warmth over the southeastern part of the country and across the western states and through the desert southwest of the Ohio Valley. Temperatures about normal. So that little dip in the jet on the precip chart here for January through the 14th, it's still somewhat active. The potential for some snowfall out of Nebraska, Kansas, through the upper Midwest, northern Great Lakes region. The main storm track with those lows along those green lines, the average steering currents with that trough right there through the middle part of the country. So there'll be probably a rain to snow system. This does not look to be a big major feature coming through, but some of that, as you would expect, for early January through the Ohio Valley, the eastern Corn Belt down to Dixie, the I-10, I-20 corridor to about the Appalachians into the northeast of New England. And again, drying out back west of the Missouri through the Red River Valley back all the way into California. So again, Sarah, it's manageable. There's nothing out of control for now through mid-January. Here we are, about a month into astronomical wintertime. Almost about a month and a half through at least meteorological winter time, and so far a very manageable setup across much of the country.
So do you see, can we take even a longer look and say, hey, yes, this winter is going to be mild overall? And we kind of forecasted that the last time when we talked, and we're kind of on track. So are you still seeing that holding true?
Yeah, and we'll just answer your question there. And actually, maybe on our next broadcast, we'll try to put some thinking together here. And actually, we did on the year-end show. Actually, it's been
Mhm.
produced already. It'll be the last couple of days, the last day or two of December, early January. We do have a spring outlook coming up on This Week in Agribusiness, so that is available. And maybe in our next broadcast here with us on Feedstuffs, we'll bring that out for you. And we can talk about it as well here later on as we move through the session here. In any event, we do have another slug of some cold air. Yeah, mid to late January. It's El Nino, but it's a progressive weather pattern, as in you get shifts and ridges and troughs. The weather pattern is moving and migrating across the country. Here you go, a little below average on temperatures as far south as maybe Vegas, into the Pacific Northwest, to the upper Midwest. And there's a sliver of some of that Arctic air up through the southern Canadian prairie. Temperatures a bit above average for the Ohio Valley to the eastern states and down to the Gulf Coast area. Anytime you get that trough, that U-shaped configuration across the middle part of the country, Sarah, and you get this kind of range, this compaction of temperatures, you come up with this moisture pattern, and it tends to be a busier one. Yeah, there'll be some snow, would you believe, in January, mid to late January, practically back into the Pacific Northwest, northern and central Rockies. I think it's going to be a down year for snowfall totals in some of those ski areas. The livestock areas, they'll get some snowfall, probably a rain to snow pattern once again. Don't foresee any Arctic air following in behind this. So look at it as some additional moisture and drought improvement for a good part of the plains, western and northern Corn Belt locales, up into the parts of the Northeast to New England. It's probably going to be a rain system there and drying out over the deep south and southeastern part of the country. So there you have it through the 21st of January, Sarah, and kind of answering your question going forward. We need to keep an eye on. We anticipate over probably the start of early spring, the beginning of the breakdown of El Nino, where those warming
Mhm.
temperatures are degree and a half above average in the Central Pacific. People would think, that what's the big deal there, Greg? Well, that's a big area of water out there that has a direct influence on the atmosphere. That's why we keep track of water temperatures, in the Pacific, the Atlantic, whatever, because of, three quarters of the planet, about 74 point something percent
Mhm.
is water. So there's a direct correlation between sea surface temperatures and the atmosphere. So there's a look at the January. I think we've got something that takes us through the last part of the month as well, don't we? There you
There
go.
we go.
And it's a return to El Nino. There you go. So, again, not the way the remainder of the winter time season will be going. So, as we say on the radio, enjoy it while you may. Back into another run of, we're not looking at spring-like readings, typical highs this time of the year through the Great Lakes region up through the Canadian Prairie, Minnesota, daytime highs normally average into the teens and 20s. So we're looking at probably 20s and 30s by day, and certainly obviously well below freezing at night. Some degree of snow cover the ground, but they'll be going through some areas of the Great Lakes and Northern Corn Belt back into a thaw-freeze cycle back and forth. Same with the Ohio Valley, a little above average there. Normal temperatures from California and the southeastern states and down through Texas, the southwest. Readings are a bit below average. That largely contributing to that drop in temperatures because of cloud cover. You can see the main polar jet is poised up near the Canadian border, so there's no super cold air concern for livestock managers. But on the precipitation chart here, it's a wetter scenario and could conceivably in some of the higher terrain of Colorado, New Mexico. You get it out through Dalhart, Amarillo, the Oklahoma Panhandle, Goodland, Garden City. You can sometimes get those rain over to snow systems based on geography and topography. So that'll be the story there. Wet weather over the deep south and southeastern part of the country. And it's a drier trend as well. No storm systems, no clipper features, nothing going on. What should be a pretty amazing mid to late stretch and conclusion to the month of January through the Midwest and Corn Belt locales. And again, let me emphasize, Sarah, that this is not the way the rest of the winter season goes. Again, we talked about that on the TV show and discussed it and forecasted. The maps and charts are on there as well. You can maybe see that on some of the farm progress sites. I'm sure that's still posted or will be posted. And the New Year's show, the end of the year show, will have our spring outlook, which I think maybe when we get together in January, we'll start sharing some thoughts on the upcoming growing season across the Corn Belt and the plains.
That would be great. One question,
Sure.
we've got that volcano erupting over in Iceland. Is that going to have any kind of influence? We saw some influence this summer from the forest fires in
Yep.
Canada.
Exactly.
Might that have any influence on any of these, just the weather patterns.
Well, if you put it in the context of what we had this past summer with the growing season and the need to make rainfall and to get some sunshine and insulation, I think I'd seen on some social media accounts. I didn't go back and look over them super thoroughly, but there was some indication that where some of the thicker cloud debris or ashen clouds kind of diminished the sunshine, that there was a slight reduction of growth and development in some of the upper Midwestern fields and parts of the Great Lakes region and into the southeastern parts of the Canadian prairie. There are some pockets of corn, would you believe, in the southeastern Canada. We were up around Mount Washington about 4 or 5 years ago. Couldn't believe it. We're driving up there. There's a cornfield at the base of the mountain. Amazing. I've never seen that before. Anyway, yeah, there's some correlation. Of course, there's Mount Pinatubo that erupted, decades ago, that had an influence on the steering currents, the amount of sunshine, the amount of warming going on. So if this were, I think, on a bigger, larger scale, like we had with the Canadian fires, I mean, it was through the tundra, the boreal region, down into the northern plains and into the southeastern Canada. If it's something like that degree, I would think there will be probably some marginal need or, something that will probably impact the weather to some degree. I think that particular eruption probably negligible in the big forecasting picture of things.
Well, that's good. That's good news. So, all right. Any final comments to leave us with here today, Greg?
Well, I think enjoy these balmy days of winter time because, as we say on the radio as well and TV once in a while. I think Mr. Armstrong gets a little tired of me saying it. Watch your foot and your hoof accordingly when these systems come through the plain states, because they will tend to muddy things up, I'm sure. But again, look at it as moisture gain. There's no frost or freeze to the ground. Late winter, spring's going to be a little more challenging. We didn't see a lot of issues for the. We'll leave you with this. We did not see a lot of issues for the growing season as it applied to the plains and the Corn Belt locales with planning. It looked to be a no-brainer, no headline type of pattern. We'll talk about that and have some graphics for you down the line. And apart from that, happy holidays to one and all out there.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your time today. Happy holidays to you, Greg.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, we thank all of you for tuning in and spending time with us today. A reminder that all Feedstuffs 365 segments are available at feedstuffs.com. Simply go to Feedstuffs 365 in the nav bar, click there, and you can watch Greg, or you can watch any other sessions that we've been doing, and you can also share those with your friends and colleagues. And of course, Greg is on every week on This Week in Agribusiness. So we hope you tune in and check that out as well. Until next time, for Feedstuffs 365, I'm Sarah Muirhead.